Hello and welcome to this event, System Center 2025 Unveiled. My name is David Worcester and I will be your event host for the session this afternoon. We'll be providing you deep insights and expert discussion on Operations Manager, Orchestrator, Service Manager, Configuration Manager and Virtual Machine Manager as being the main products we'll be covering this afternoon. This event will be recorded, and I'd also like to welcome those who are watching on demand after the event. So today I'd like to introduce briefly the speakers that we've got here this afternoon. Christian Heitkamp, who will be talking about Operations Manager. Greg Charman, who will be talking about Orchestrator and in-depth around automation. Marcus Kostner, who will be covering Service Manager. Ross McIntyre, who's covering System Center, and more in particular, Virtual Machine Manager, and Simon White, who will be covering Configuration Manager for us. I will give a bit more detail about their backgrounds at the beginning of each of their sessions. So in terms of our agenda this afternoon, we're going to start looking at the life cycle. So this is the life cycle around System Center. We'll then jump into Orchestrator, and follow that with Configuration Manager. Christian will then take us through Operations Manager, and I think he's also touching on SCOM MI, the managed instance version. Ross will take us through Virtual Machine Manager, and then Marcus will bring up with Service Manager and covering its new aspects for 2025. We'll then have a summary at the end and talk about the upgrade order. If you're going to move and consider a migration activity, what steps should you take and in which order you should do them, product by product, within the System Center suite. We'll then finish with a Q&A session at the end, where we'll take each of the questions that have come up through the webinar, and each individual presenter will then cover their own topic or add insights from their experience on each other presenters' areas. So I think in terms of this session, the System Center lifecycle is really why most people have joined this event today. So the key thing about System Center, it is a product set that continues to go probably beyond most of what most of us were expecting, especially after 2016. And if you look at 2012, or if you're on 2012, you're really well beyond the extended support date for Microsoft. However, if you're on 2016 or 2019, you're now in extended support. And effectively, that extended support means that Microsoft will answer your support queries, but they won't undertake any product development or functionality resolutions other than really doing security updates. This means for organizations currently on those platforms, they really need to start looking at or considering their migration plans. As you can see, System Center 2025, released in November 2024, gives us standard support or mainstream support out to 2030, and then extended support goes all the way out to 2035. So that really does give you a showing that System Center will be around for a good time yet. So in today's session, each speaker will focus on the upgrade advice for their particular product, and also identify any issues that they're aware of or that you need to be planning for when upgrading to System Center 2025. Our first presenter today will be Greg Charman. Greg heads up services and solutions for Calvirion. He has over 30 years of experience in enterprise and the managed services arena, and has focused on the IT process automation space, originally with Aparlis and then System Center Orchestrator for over 18 years, including a stint at Microsoft, and partners with customers to improve and automate their service desk processes. Greg, over to you.
There we go. So, Orchestrator. It is where does it fit within the wider System Center suite if you're not entirely familiar with it, as everybody's not using? Well, when Microsoft acquired what is now Orchestrator back in 2010, the acquisition team, who I got to join, basically brought Orchestrator to integrate all of the System Center tools together. So there are connectors from Orchestrator into all of the enterprise management tools in the System Center suite to allow you to orchestrate the functions and capabilities that you can do with System Center, whether that be an end-to-end virtual machine provisioning from Service Manager into Virtual Machine Manager to provision a virtual machine, add it under management within Operations Manager, deploy software to it through Config Manager, and you could even go in there and obviously add backups to those virtual machines through DPM, through all automated through Orchestrator workflows, and you can use it to extend out into other third-party products. So that's where it came in the suite, and it's worth looking at. We're looking at 2025, but it's worth just looking what happened in 2022 and how that fitted into the wider thing. Well, Orchestrator 2019 and its predecessors were all 32-bit applications. The big thing that came in Orchestrator 2022 is it's the first version that had native 64-bit application support, which means it's compatible with the modern 64-bit versions of Windows servers and brought it in line with the rest of the System Center tools. So the advantage of that, obviously, that gives us a direct access to 64-bit PowerShell, which means that we can do a lot more with it. You've got a long-term viability of the application. And we're now leveraging the modern 64-bit DLLs and other bits, the SQL drivers in that capability, and it also significantly improved the underlying security capabilities that we had within Orchestrator. But with the 64-bit means we can now use all of the PowerShell capabilities because virtually all PowerShell now is all 64-bit, which meant using it in older versions of Orchestrator was very, very time-consuming and caused quite a lot of headache. So we can now execute that directly from within the PowerShell space. And it also introduced a new web console and web service, which improved the performance and capabilities. But there are several issues with 2022. There are two update roll-ups for 2022, which have got hot fixes for those UR updates, and there are still some functionality which isn't working in 2022, and the .NET framework version that is used in 2022 has also end of life. So there were some issues within 2022, even though it added some new capabilities. What's new in 2025? Well, what that's added is support for OLDB 19, so we can actually provide SQL encryption connections by default. So it's improved the underlying backend performance. We've also got .NET 8 support, so now bringing Orchestrator in line with .NET support frameworks. So that's the latest and most secure version of .NET, which is on what they call the long-term support channel. So Orchestrator 2025 should be good from a .NET support and lifecycle point of view going forward, which is very good if you're doing security pen tests, because the 2022 version is end of life, as is 2019. Added support for TLS 1.3, and you can now use group managed service accounts for all of your Orchestrator services, so it improves the reliability of the service and security of the underlying service platforms. And as David has mentioned, because it's now got extended support out to 2035, so we've got long-term support for that Orchestrator platform for building out automations and capabilities. It also resolved a whole load of the issues that were underlying within the 2022 environment. So one of the biggest issues is that the event tab in Orchestrator 2022 did not work. That's now been resolved so that you can actually see any events that are raised by Orchestrator in the events tab. and any issues with integration packs, because a lot of them write to the events tab. Fix the SSH activity, and they've also included the latest release of the P-Link at November 2024 was included in that, so that's now up to date. Fixed issues with the database query activity, and a number of things that made the web service actually operate. There were some issues within the web console due to operations in the underlying web service, and they fixed the issues with the runbook tester canvas as well. So 2025 has got all of the capabilities of 64-bit that was introduced with Orchestrator 2022, plus some more security and all of the bugs worked out of it. So from that point of view, it's good capability and a lot of functionality in there. But because it's 64-bit, that does bring in some challenges for customers looking at migration. So the biggest challenge is PowerShell versioning and script syntax. So Orchestrator 2019 and its predecessors were older 32-bit and were based around using PowerShell 2. With PowerShell 3 and upwards, we're now on to PowerShell 6s and 7s. There were a number of fundamental syntax changes in the operation of PowerShell. So for customers who are upgrading, particularly if you've got runbooks full of PowerShell that have been around for a number of years, migrating, there are challenges because they will have been written based on being in a 32-bit environment. You've now moved them to a 64-bit environment, so you might need to rework how they operate because they don't run directly, and you also have to check all of the do a good chunk of testing to make sure the syntax in you're not affected by the syntax errors in the execution of your scripts, and some of those are quite subtle when they don't work. So if you're using PowerShell and .NET Script in Orchestrator 2019 or earlier, if you're looking to move up, that's something you need to put on your migration test plan. Is I need to reevaluate all my PowerShell and make sure it still operates once I've migrated my runbooks across. The other challenge you've got is integration packs. No integration packs written for Orchestrator 2019 or earlier, they are not compatible with Orchestrator 2022 or 2025 because they were written for a 32-bit application and they will not work in the modern 2025 or 2022 platforms because they are 64-bit. So that means Kelvian integrations. If you use Kelvian products, then I'm pleased to say that all of our Orchestrator IPs have been migrated to 2022 and 2025 and will work in these new environments. If you have Microsoft integration packs, Microsoft have released integration packs for the System Center products. Note, they are listed as for System Center 2022. They will work with 2025 and Microsoft. There are footnotes on Microsoft's pages to say if you want to connect Orchestrator 2025 to Operations Manager 2025, you use the Operations Manager 2022 integration pack. So just a little bit of a footnote. But there are some other Microsoft integrations that they had that they have not ported. So some they have slightly updated and a number they dropped support from. So FTP IPs have been dropped. There are a number of other IPs that they have dropped out. So you need to look at the information on some of those IPs. And a number of them, although they're supported for 2022, have not actually been updated or changed. So they have a lot of legacy product version support. So it's just something to bear in mind. But the biggest challenge is if you're using any community or Codeplex integration. So a lot of people have got some community tools like data manipulation, and there was a start runbook job, and there's some health monitor type capabilities that had been released for Orchestrator 2012. communities that have been moved and people continue to use, those were written for 32-bit applications. They will not work in 2022 or 2025. So you're going to need to find alternative ways of delivering those capabilities. If you're not sure, you can give me a shout and I can advise a bit further. And of course, if you have got an in-house developed integration packs, and I've worked with some customers who have, those will also have issues because the whole platform has been migrated and changed. So you're going to have to rebuild and redevelop those ones if you've even got the original source code. So from a migration point of view, biggest issues are PowerShell and then integration pack for doing any concerns with migration. And that really is what you need to know, is what's new in Orchestrator and what you need from a migration point of view.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that insight on Orchestrator. We've had a number of questions in, which we'll cover off at the end. So Configuration Manager is our next topic. And I'd like to introduce now Simon White from Calvirion. Simon is a senior consultant at Calvirion and has worked with Configuration Manager, almost unbelievably, Simon, for over 18 years.
Yes.
And he's been here at Calvirion for 9 years and been working also with Orchestrator and implementing IT automation processes for customers, helping them integrate and automate their infrastructures. So, Simon, over to you.
Thank you, David. Yes, since Configuration Manager, when it used to be called SCCM, 2007 was my first major foray into the application. Well, Configuration Manager sort of falls outside of the box in the System Center suite. It's not really Config Manager 2022 or 2025. Since 2015, Microsoft really changed the way they deliver Configuration Manager, and they started with some incremental updates. So the first version of that was 15.11 back in 2015, and then there were incremental updates of Config Manager from then on that you would receive via your Config Manager console. They approximately release a new version of Config Manager every 6 months, and each one of these incremental updates is normally supported by Microsoft for 18 months. So I'm going to go through some of the feature updates with the latest baseline version of Configuration Manager, that is 24.03, and the latest incremental update to that is 24.09, because these are the top two supported versions of Configuration Manager that you can have running at the moment. So one of the first features that was added in 24.03 was global search. It's provided the ability for you to search anywhere in your console, and it was pretty useful for finding things that you've possibly forgotten about. It could be an app or a test app or something that you've imported or added to your Config Manager console, and you weren't aware that maybe you've created a script that goes with it. With version 24.09, this was further improved to be able to filter that on workspaces. You can see the image there at the top, so you can search assets and compliance, software library, etc. So it enabled you to filter that search results that you could have. They also added the ability for you to sort your scripts now in the console. Before it was just one big folder of scripts. Now you can actually add some folders within there to manage your scripts. On the operating system deployment, the retry option that used to be, or was still available for software updates and application model apps, is now available for installed packages and legacy packages in your operating system deployment. It will allow you to configure how many times you want to retry one of these steps before the task sequence failed. That's quite handy, really, because before, if it failed on the first go, it just failed and stopped. They've also added a health dashboard in 2403 for software updates. It's just a handy overview of any software updates, whether they've installed, any issues with downloads and deployments. And you would select this via the choice of a software update group. So other changes, they've added operating system support in 2409 for Windows Server 2025, so you can use that as a site server in Config Manager. They've also added support for Windows 11 24H2. And in version 2403, there was support for ARM64 devices, and they improved on that in 2409 by giving you the ability to use BitLocker and software metering with those devices. Other worthwhile things mentioning, the Cloud Management Gateway, its security has improved as it shifted itself towards using a managed identity instead of storage. And they've improved the ability to renew your application secret keys for Entra ID. You can now select a chosen length of time where you couldn't before. So if you've got a test environment for your config manager, you can now set this to a much longer date, and you can set it to much shorter if you wanted to for your production environment. So let's have a look at some of the stuff that they've removed or has been deprecated. The main one is MDT, that's the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. So Microsoft announced this is going end of life in October 2025. This isn't really much of a surprise because when you look at the supported operating systems that MDT supports, they sort of stop at Windows 10 and Windows Server 2019. So this doesn't mean, that you can't keep using it, but you are going to have to start planning on migrating your task sequences away from any MDT steps that you've got within those task sequences. And if you're wondering how you can identify that, if you look at the bottom left of one of those MDT steps, you'll have the little link URL, microsoft.com/MDT will appear. So you'll be able to identify those. Normally, best thing we're doing nowadays is just to replace these with a PowerShell script step instead. But Microsoft is really pushing Windows 11 OSD deployments via autopilot in Intune. So there's less and less use as they're providing less and less support for the OSD deployments in Config Manager. They have removed support now for SQL Server 2012 and SQL Server 2014 for Config Manager. You really shouldn't be on these anyway. SQL Server 2012 went end of life in July 2022, and SQL Server 2014 went end of life in July 2024. SystemCenter Update Publisher was deprecated from Config Manager in 2403. You can still add third-party libraries into Config Manager if you need to. So there's a list of third-party catalogs on the Microsoft website that you can use, like Adobe, Dell, HP, and Lenovo. But in each case, you should really check with the vendors that their catalog support in-console third-party updates. In version 2403, the support for HTTP-only communication was removed. So from 2403 onwards, only HTTPS or enhanced HTTP is supported. Enhanced HTTP is really a good step if you've got challenges with managing your own PKI certificates, as Config Manager takes over and provides the secure communication for issuing its own self-signed certificates. Any gotchas? Well, if you're doing a brand new install of 2403 and updating it to 2409, you might find you're going to miss this one. That is the Microsoft ODBC driver for SQL Server 18.10 or later. If you're already on version 2309, then you should already have this installed, so you won't have that problem. But brand new installs of Config Manager, you will probably miss that. It's not necessarily listed as one of the prereqs, but you will get an error. So automating with Config Manager and some of the other System Center products, you can still use the Config Manager PowerShell, but be aware on updates, not all the PowerShell commandlet changes are documented by Microsoft. So with each incremental version, do validate that any PowerShell scripts that you're using are still functioning correctly. You can still use the WMIC commands. These are quite complex to figure out, but thankfully most of the useful ones in the past have made their way into the Config Manager console, like the ability to force clients to check policy and evaluate for software updates. And Microsoft, as Greg mentioned, still provide the integration pack for Configuration Manager, and it's called System Center 2022 Integration Pack for System Center 2022 Configuration Manager. So either Microsoft call it 2022 Configuration Manager, despite the version not really being 2022. It's not changed. It's been the same configuration pack version since it was released in June 2022. And some of the activities level remain the same, and pretty much were the same on the older versions of the integration pack that you used to get with Orchestrator 2019. You can still generate alerts for deployment failures direct through the Config Manager console. Normally come with a checkbox like this to send the alert to Operations Manager. And from our Calvarian perspective, we've been using Config Manager and integrating it with Orchestrator and other customers' service desks through our automated patching solution. That is a useful way for us to automate the deployments of updates and add devices to collections to receive deployments. Had some success with customers doing this for a number of years now. And that's it. I shall pass it back to David.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you for that in-depth overview. What we'll now move on to is Operations Manager, and I'd like to introduce Christian Heitkamp. Christian is a product manager at NICE IT Management Solutions. Christian has over 15 years hands-on experience with SCOM in very large and complex IT environments, typically where SCOM gets deployed, I think, these days. He also leads their product and business development and drives innovation in monitoring for enterprise applications such as Microsoft 365, Oracle, and VMware. Christian, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, David, for the introduction. And I'm just going to get started basically also with the news section first. So, well, there are a couple of news only, like a couple of points, and I think the most important are around security on the left-hand side. So where we basically go up the ladder with the SSL versions here to be able to basically be secure and have a secured communication in place. So also a couple of new browsers are supported, and the upgrade from SCOM 2022, where I just have in a moment a more detailed upgrade tree also, where how you can basically go from one version to the other one. And in the end, well, I'll have a couple of slides also on the integration of the other products of System Center 2025. So I added one thing on the right side here because it's particularly important here, because there are some agent support that got deprecated, so especially for those Power platforms, so in IBM Power. So Microsoft basically dropped the entire system on IBM Power, and especially I and my team basically see quite a lot of requests coming in right now. So Microsoft dropped this. Well, I asked them, why did you drop this, basically, and say nobody's using it. And well, actually people are using it, but it looks like there were a little knowledge on Microsoft side on the IBM Power infrastructure. So with the Red Hat environment and also AIX7 basically is dropped. So and is no longer in support. So as there were quite a number of customers, they approached Microsoft, and Microsoft approached basically us. So we had a conversation and said, well, okay, we can continue maintaining them. So if you're on the IBM Power in a System Center environment, so you can basically approach us and at NICE and ask for support for those. So let's look at the upgrade tree, because it's well, the key is basically going from one version to the other one. And as you know, with Systems Operations Manager, you can't jump if you do in-place upgrade. So for those who are not familiar with that, you can do in-place upgrade, basically stepping up from one version to the other. You can side-by-side upgrade, where you basically pull up the infrastructure again and basically move then all your workloads from the existing environment to the new environment. So, which basically gives you a clean installation. And there's an entire webinar on this, which we had a couple of weeks ago. So if you are more interested, you can look that up. And I'm not going to repeat this here. So just for your background, you basically step up from one level to another. There is also obviously the underlying operating system you have to take into account. If you're on Windows Server 2019, you're in a good shape, because Windows Server 2019 is still supported with SCOM 2025. So you basically can just go up. Otherwise, you need to go through an operating system upgrade at the same time or before. Well, and obviously you shouldn't be missing here the SQL servers around. Again, here it goes all the way back to 2017, also with SCOM 2025. So you have a good chance to have your version, your SQL Server version, on a correct version that is supported by SCOM 2025. So take the slide and pin it on the wall, or make a plan where you can go from one version to the other. We've been working with a lot of customers that doing that step, and the in-place upgrades are typically smooth with their little changes, but make sure you go to latest update roll-up before you step over to the next version. Then typically we have seen very to no impacts. On the other side, we also have customers who do side-by-side upgrade, who basically rebuild the infrastructure on the other side. So that's basically, in short, the details on how to get basically the upgrade to SCOM 2025. So let's have a quick look on the integration. So when again, we have now the Operations Manager in the middle here, and where it has basically management packs to the other product in the System Center portfolio. So here, let's start basically at the top. So we have the Orchestrator. So, and on the Orchestrator, we have the management pack. You can download it from the catalog, and I put it in, so it works. It does discover all the components, checks the workflow, so that is working and supporting. If you go to the left around here, well, unfortunately, the management pack from Microsoft for the Configuration Manager was deprecated, and in fact does not work anymore. So you can download it, but it does not work anymore. So most of you might be familiar with Kevin Holman, who is like basically the guru on the Operations Manager side. So you can also go to his GitHub repository and download the management pack basically made available there. So and there's actually quite good community support. So I also put that in our environment, so works fine. So I can also give a recommendation on that integration, although it's not from Microsoft, but it can be downloaded and is at no cost basically. There is an up-to-date version of the DPM management pack. There are basically very few using the DPM out there, so but it's still up-to-date here. When we come to Virtual Machine Manager, it's on the catalog. It can be integrated, also works. It doesn't have official support statement for later SCOM versions, but it is there and works. More difficult is the Service Manager integration, because that management pack is really like updated a long time ago. So basically it was last 2012. Again, it can be imported and still works. So you can, for example, see the workflows that are running on the Service Manager. But again, that's why I put this in gray. So it has no actual version, but in some management packs, also a bit tricky. You don't know actually if there's if it's supported or not for Microsoft. But in the end, the management packs are not overly complex. You basically can export them, have a look at them. If something doesn't work, and customize it. So it's typically better if you're in charge and you understand a bit of the management pack, how they're built and how they are assembled. You typically can work around if there's one other thing that doesn't work. So, but in essence, that can be imported. The only one from Microsoft that just doesn't work at all anymore is the management pack for the configuration manager. As David mentioned already earlier, I have a couple of notes on the SCOM managed instance that wasn't part of the previous slides, but it's a bit separate, obviously, and it's following a different pricing scheme as well. So, so the SCOM managed instance is basically, well, I call it really like first a lift and shift from like an on-premise operations manager environment into Azure Monitor, or in Azure basically. And we have basically in the Azure part, in the Microsoft managed part, a number of management servers. These are Windows management servers that are part of a scale set. So you basically deploy everything. It's transparent. You can look into it, what is happening, but on the end, it's one deployment script that goes in there. So you can then also connect to the management service and theoretically do things on these management servers. And there's always been a bit of discussion, actually, who has the responsibility of these management servers. But in the end, you can update and recycle them from the Azure Azure dashboard here. And the SQL managed instance is completely managed, so there is no SQL instance you can connect to, but you basically have just this SQL managed instance, so to say, and there's no server basically you can touch with. The reporting on the right side down here has changed, so the reporting you use basically from on-premise is not there anymore. You're basically using the Azure Managed Grafana or Power BI basically for reports, which obviously doesn't have like out-of-the-box templates. So you're left basically to build them yourself here. So this is a bit of a pain point I see, and you have to do something. Depends a bit how much you use or you currently use the reports in SCOM. Scaling up and down basically is quite easy. So the scaling up and update, this is can be done through the console. I did it. That's now working, and it can be seen production ready. And then basically you have the resource pool that is the part of Azure, and in the end the portal. On the left side or up here you see the on-premise component, and for many this might be still a bit of a strange point, because you still need on-premise. You need on the very top here the domain server, the Active Directory. So if you don't have an AD and you don't want to basically create a trust between your AD and your subscription, then this will not work. So you basically really need to make a full federation of both environments in order this to work. And then you can deploy the agent on-prem or to Azure VMs as you like. So, and in the end, it's the biggest, let's say, aha effect is like what is really great is the performance. So the SQL managed instance is really fast. Also, the management servers are really fast. So if you have seen a fast environment, then this is SCOM managed instance environment. So even if it gets in terms bigger, then that will also work. So that's in short, this SCOM managed instance. I have one additional slide, because we all know basically a bit of the cost structure on the system center on premises. We have like basically a core-based license for all the products, and for the SCOM managed instance, it's really separate. If you buy basically or you subscribe to SCOM managed instance, you pay per endpoint per month. This is the prices from this morning. I looked this up. Basically, it's $6 or a bit less in euro that you pay. I didn't check the sterling pound basically here, but it's probably around the same one. And then you have to add infrastructure cost to this. So the biggest chunk here is the SQL managed instance again, which is kind of expensive, and they have changed a couple of plans now. It got a bit down, but it's still the biggest part of the cost on a fixed cost basis. And if you have only like a couple of endpoints, let's say you have like 100 or 20 endpoints, this is a good offer, I think. Right. So with that, that would be my part. So, and I will pass over it back to David and leave the control then to Ross. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Now we'd like to move on to looking at Virtual Machine Manager, and I'd like to introduce Ross McIntyre. Ross is a seasoned IT specialist with over 30 years of experience in development and operations. He's been a subject matter expert since 2012 for Microsoft System Center within a large IT operations arena, focusing on areas such as monitoring, automation, security, and critically private cloud virtualization. All in all, achieving high service availability. So really using the tools for what everybody's on the call is aiming for, Ross.
All right, excellent. Thanks, David. So I'll start with a brief overview of VMM and where it sits within the System Center suite. So VMM is your management solution for your virtualized data centers. It enables users to configure and manage virtual machines, hosts, and virtual networks. It supports multiple hypervisors, and it is integrated with the other System Center products. It's integrated with Orchestrator using the supplied integration packs, and that allows you to do all your virtual machine lifecycle operations. It's also integrated with Operations Manager for all your monitoring and alerting. So basically what I'll talk about now is what is new in the latest releases. With VMM 2022 came support for, as you would imagine, Windows Server 22, along with Windows 11. Windows 11. On top of that, VMM 2022 also supports the Azure Stack HCI clusters 21H2 and 22H2 from UR1 onwards. It also delivered support for these Linux operating systems from UR2. And with the latest release in 2025, Microsoft has brought in support for Server 25, along with Azure Local 23H2. That's the new name for Azure Stack HCI. As you know, Microsoft like to rename things. And as well, it brought in support for these Linux operating systems. Now, if you're already running VMM and you're starting to look at VMM 2025, I'm guessing you're probably running 2019 or earlier. So an important thing to note is that VMM 2025 has dropped support for Server 2016. So if you have Hyper-V running on Server 2016 or earlier, and you're wanting to start deploying Server 2025 using the latest System Center products, you probably need to consider having multiple VMM installations running side by side. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. The Linux support has grown with the 2025 release. I haven't yet seen them dropping support for any Linux operating systems. Linux only started to appear in 2019, so I imagine that as the supported operating systems go into life, then we'll start to see them drop out. But for now, all these operating systems are supported within the VMM fabric. VMware 2025 has dropped support for vSphere and ESX6. So that's another one to keep in mind. If you need to maintain your connection to ESX6, then you probably need to keep your existing VMM and run alongside VMM 2025. Microsoft has put quite a bit of effort into the integration with VMware. It's commonly known that many customers are now considering a shift away from VMware. Microsoft would obviously like them to move over to Hyper-V. So as a result, VMM 2025 comes with faster ESX to Hyper-V VM conversion. And the VM conversion from a VMware host onto Hyper-V can easily be achieved from the VMM console. In 2025, also brought us some security enhancements, namely credential security and TLS 1.3. But one of the most interesting ones, I think, is that it's interesting to note that the new virtual machines provisioned from the VMM console will now default to Gen 2 machines instead of Gen 1. This aligns it with the Server 2025 Hyper-V and its more secure boot architecture. Azure Arc, what does this mean? So the concept of Arc-enabled VMM was first introduced in 2019 UR5. What it basically does is allows you to connect your VMM environment to Azure and perform VM self-service operations directly from the Azure portal. It'll basically give you a unified experience. So Arc-enabled VMM, it basically extends the control of VMM managed infrastructure, joining up your public and private clouds for a unified management experience and performing all your lifecycle operations from of your private cloud VMs directly from the Azure portal. Hot patching support. This is an interesting one that's worth watching. It first appeared in Server 22 Azure Edition only, but it always required running a VM in Azure, or at the very least Azure Stack HCI. Hot patching is a way to install operating system security updates on a Windows server without having to restart your machine. This will be available as standard on any version of Server 25. I've still to explore this one fully, but I think it's extremely interesting since it brings in the ability to hot patch physical or virtual machines without the need for a reboot outside of Azure and simply managed by your private cloud VMM. With Arc enablement, there is no longer a need for SPF. That will be discontinued. For anyone who uses this web service interface to interact with VMM, you would now need to look at the Azure portal or Azure APIs. Your upgrade and deployment options, as I previously mentioned, if you're looking at VMM 2025 and you're already running VMM, it's likely that you're probably on 2019 or earlier. That being said, if you are bang up to date and planning to go from 2022 to 2025, an in-place upgrade from 22 to 25 is supported by Microsoft. It's not something I personally would recommend. You don't want to end up in a situation where you're running VMM 2025 on Windows Server 2022. Personally, I think that just where things start to get a bit messy. I would always recommend to build new and have side-by-side installations, managing your new 2025 hosts on the new installation, and then reassociating any supported host to the new 2025 VMM as part of your upgrade project. That way you can leave behind any legacy operating systems, and hopefully you'll have a server currency project on the go to decommission them over time. The last slide I wanted to share was regarding the SCOM integration. If you're planning on connecting VMM 2025 to an existing SCOM management group, then be aware that the management packs delivered by VMM 2019 have been deprecated, and you'll need to remove these to allow 2025 to deploy the latest supported versions. In theory, if you are looking at VMM 2025, then you're probably also looking at SCOM 2025, so you shouldn't hit this problem. But just be aware that VMM deploys the SCOM management packs from the VMM server once the integration is established. So in order to remove them, basically you need to break the SCOM connection between to VMM. You can do that with PowerShell on the VMM server. Then delete all your management packs from SCOM and delete the run as account. Make sure you have at least this version of the SQL Server for Windows Discovery Management Pack. This management pack's been out since June 2022, but it's worth just checking because it is a direct dependency on the new VMM management packs. If the dependency is not met, then the management packs will simply not install. Once you've removed all your packs and checked your prereq, you simply then need to recreate your SCOM connection within the VMM console. This will automatically deploy the latest SCOM management packs directly into SCOM and recreate the run as account. And the run as account then you just have to distribute it and set your credentials like you did previously. And that's really all I've got to talk about. So with that, I'll hand back to David.
Thank you, Ross. Appreciate that. Nice deep insight there on VMM and some of the things to look out for. We're now moving on to look at Service Manager, and I'd like to introduce Marcus Kostner. Marcus is a lead developer at Axions, where he builds a product suite extending System Center around service management, patch management, and monitoring. Marcus has over 10 years of experience of working with System Center Service Manager, both from a consultancy and a development point of view. So Marcus, welcome. Over to you.
Thank you very much, David. Now going on with the topic Service Manager. Actually, what's new for Service Manager is quite a little bit there, not so much to talk about. It's quite some little stuff like the support for the Windows operating system or something for the browser versions like the Edge version and the Chrome version going up to date, and some minor changes for the SQL server. So nothing like new features or something like that. We have some smaller free fixes from previous updates, but no new topics or no new features coming to the Service Manager. The important thing, I think, is that the Service Manager support is continued here from Microsoft side, and you can further use it in your environment, because I think service management is more like a topic for the processes you're using and not about not only about the software you are using. So what are the benefits of the Service Manager? Why are you using it, or why you should use it, is because it's very strong and has a very strong and flexible data model. So you can actually put everything you want to in the system, and can make something like, I don't know, some customer of us used it for facility management. So you don't have to do it with service management or IT service management. You can use it for that too. So it's quite extensible and flexible, and you can put everything you want to do into that system, and you can use it as a good base for integrating data and stuff you're using in your processes. So another point, it's very good automatable, so you can automate your processes, and you can ensure that your processes are done the way you are planning it and not otherwise. So that's the clear benefits of the service manager, and we have seen these benefits and put it into an environment I want to talk about now. We implemented at a customer. So the customer was a company which provided private cloud solution, and they already had developed some PowerShell scripts, some very powerful PowerShell scripts, doing the complete stuff for deploying and providing the cloud elements for their customers. And they were searching for some solution to bring that automation to the customer, so they can do some self-service at that point. And what we did was we provided the PowerShells, or we combined them with the service manager, developing some request offerings and bringing them to the customer with a modern web UI. Actually, not the Microsoft portal, of course, because that one is a little bit ancient, I would say. No, we provided a modern web UI, and we developed at Actions, which is called Axanto now. So if you're interested in that stuff, you can go to axanto.com and have a look. And we brought that web UI to the customer so that he can use the offerings, filling out the information, like if you want to add a contact or a user, if you want to change the password of a user, and so on. If you want to provide some calendar functionality in Exchange, all these offerings we provided for the customer, and with a detailed role model and tenant management. And at the end, when the offerings has been filled out, we started the existing PowerShell scripts with a custom activity we developed, and we filled in the inputs of the user to the PowerShell script so they can perform the tasks necessary automatically. And so we realized this private cloud web portal for the customer. Just have a little screenshot for that here, where you see the UI, where you can see the requests. This is the admin view at that point, where the admin sees all the requests that have been performed. And you see something like assign user, or remove a group, or create a folder, or something like that. Such request has been realized there. How have we realized that? We have implemented, of course, the offerings with the different user inputs, with validity checks and regex and something like that. If you want to have secure passwords and something like that, we have all implemented that in the offerings available in the service manager. And then we have provided the service requests with the PowerShell activities, where we transfer the user inputs provided by the user, by the customers, to the PowerShell, and the results of the PowerShell activities are then taken back to the service request, to the activity, so that we can see the results of that part. Of course, this could have been done with the integration of the orchestrator at that point, but we used that smaller version to be more flexible at that point, to be faster in implementing that for the customer, for the private cloud solution at that point. With this slide, we see a little overview of the service manager with the integration with the other system center products, of course, with the orchestrator, as I mentioned, where we can have the runbooks at that point. We have the integration with the config manager, where we get the complete hosts and so on, and of course with the operation manager for the monitoring. And we at Exans, we have some deeper integration at that point, if you're interested in that, like doing some patch managing, providing your users or your application owners the capability to define how their hosts has to be patched, or if you want to define your own IT services and have them monitored using the assets and the information you have in the service manager and the operation manager, then please feel free to contact me at that point. If you want to have some deeper insights to integration possibilities, service manager, and all the other system center products at that point, yes.
Thank you, Marcus. I'd like to hand over to Greg, who's going to take us on for a summary and cover the upgrade order for 2022 to 2025.
Yes, thank you, David. Yeah, in summary, what we've looked at is all of the System Center products and the tools and where we are on that. If you are looking at upgrading, so if you're already on 2022 and you want to upgrade to 2025, Microsoft has published an upgrade plan in the order in which you should upgrade different components. And they start in the order of Orchestrator needs to be upgraded first to maintain the integrations with the other System Center tools. Then Service Manager as your front end to drive through the integration and the front end portals. Then Data Protection Manager for the backup. At that point, you can lift your monitoring up with Operations Manager, and then they pull through Configuration Manager, Virtual Machine Manager, and if anybody is still using it, App Controller. So if you're looking for a across the suite migration, that is the order in which Microsoft recommend that you upgrade all of the products to the same levels. But as you can see, as we've gone through the sessions, we've touched on the points you need to think about from each of the tools in the System Center suite and how you can upgrade them and move them forward. So at this point, we'd like to open the venue up to any questions, which I know David is going to facilitate the questions, and the rest of the panel can jump on for helping answer those questions.
Thank you. Well, I hope the rest of the panel will jump on because I won't be answering them, Greg. So I think we've just had a question in around the upgrade order. Is the upgrade order identical from 2019 to 2022? So I think we've just presented the 22 to 25.
Yep.
Okay.
And the upgrade order for 2019 to 2022 is the same. On the published site, it's the same order that Microsoft say if you're upgrading the whole suite, then that's the order in which you should do them.
Okay, cool. I think this is one for you, Christian, for your perspective. What would be the main reason why Azure Monitor SCOM managed? Why would you use Azure Monitor SCOM managed instance instead of SCOM on-premise? What would be the main reason why you would do SCOM MI?
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, so this is basically if you have to decide to stay on the premise or basically going to SCOM MI. So this is something we hear frequently now, and we have helped a couple of customers on this. And yeah, there are different motivations, but I think the biggest one, which always drives this, is money, right? So, it depends a bit like how you license basically today. So if you have like perpetual license and basically license and just have software subscription, software maintenance, software or software assurance for your system center environment, then this might be rather cheap eventually. But if you have changed to instance-based license, so for those who have been around with SCOM around 2018, 2017, you remember there have been a short-term channel like 1801 and 1807, I think, these conversions. And at that point, Microsoft changed the licensing for those, remember. And we have a couple of customers who actually then switched over from the core-based license to the instance-based license and got stuck on that. And for those, it's actually much cheaper now actually to go over to instance to SCOM to Azure Managed Instance, so to SCOM MI. So again, it depends much how you pay for the infrastructure, how expensive it is to maintain the infrastructure. Plus, if you have a environment with a lot of cores, because you run very heavy workload. For example, if you have a SAP HANA environment in there or some online transaction systems where you have to license each core where you have a lot of them, then there might be a good point in making the calculation how much money you would save going to Azure SCOM Managed Instance. So, but again, that depends on the current licensing you have and how you're working with it basically. So, yeah, that's probably the biggest motivation there. And we have seen a couple of new customers onboarding directly to Azure SCOM Managed Instance, also because it's more native to Azure if you have your VMs already on there. And yeah, and it's a really hybrid scenario in that case. So, but again, it comes back to the main point, the cost. And yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe one point, there is a cost estimator. With SCOM 2022, there was a cost estimator delivered. So if you go into your SCOM and go to admin panel, in the admin panel, you have an Azure SCOM Managed Instance Migration Cost Estimator. It is only useful if you understand how it works. So look a bit under the hood, then it makes sense. Just like putting in the numbers eventually doesn't help much.
Cool. Thank you, Christian. I think this one's for you, Greg. As there are known problems with Orchestrator 2022, would you suggest missing that out and going straight to 2025? But I'm guessing that 2022 is going to get fixed, isn't it?
There was talk of a further UR update for 2022. But I've not seen any dates or guarantees that that is coming. So if you're looking at migrating at the moment, I would say yes, miss out 2022 and jump straight to 2025 from an Orchestrator point of view.
Cool, thank you. Config Manager next. So Simon, yeah, this is an interesting one because is Config Manager part of System Center or isn't it? So to what extent is Config Manager part of the System Center license bundle? What can I use and cannot use if I just license the Data Center edition for managing highly virtualized servers?
So this sort of falls a little bit under, I think, what Christian was mentioning, licensing. The Microsoft C Configuration Manager is part of the System Center suite, and their current license model is when you buy a System Center license on the servers that you are managing, and it is covered under that. So they then split it into a standard edition and a data center edition, and that depends on effectively the number of OSC environments you are managing on that virtual host. So they give you two for a standard. That's, I guess it depends on, it's pretty low. I mean, once you end up dealing with a whole System Center suite, really you're sort of looking at pushing out to the data center edition where you get, they say it's unlimited OSCs for that. So if you've got a large Hyper-V environment with a lot of servers on it, it makes sense to go straight down to the data center route to cover you off with licenses. But that is it's only the servers they're looking at. They're only managing for servers you are managing with Configuration Manager. Clients, as in desktop clients, totally separate. They're all covered under your Microsoft 365 licenses, or assuming you've got like an Office 365 E5 license or something, that will cover you under your Windows 11, Windows 10 if you're still using it, devices.
Thank you, Simon.
Hopefully that
A bit
answers
of a,
that one.
yeah, I think so. So I've got a follow-up one here for both of the previous two answers. This one for you, Greg, I think, from migrating from 2019 to 22, can you skip 2022, i.e. go straight to 25, which is what I think, I think you said, but there's a bigger issue there, isn't there? 2019 to 20.
Yes, you can certainly skip. You don't need to move to 2022. You can skip directly. You can skip 2022 and move directly to 2025. Because they're 64-bit, you've got the upgrade issues. If you need to watch out for PowerShell, you need to watch out for integration packs. The thing that I can only emphasize strongly, as I know all of the people, presenters on here will say, is don't try and do an in-place upgrade. You theoretically could do an in-place upgrade of 2019 to 2022 to 2025, but I never recommend doing an in-place upgrade of System Center, particularly Orchestrator. If you want to jump, deploy new infrastructure, put 2025 onto it, get it working, and then migrate your runbooks from 2019 across, and that will allow you to handle all of those upgrade and integration pack and PowerShell issues in a safe test environment. But certainly you can go deploy new 2025, export the runbooks out to 2019, and import them into 2025, and then test them, and they'll work.
Great, thank you. Another licensing one for you, Christian, as a follow-up. Does the $6 per endpoint in SCOM MI include SNMP devices and agentless monitoring?
That's a good question. I also tried to find out of that, but from what I see, that's not separately licensed, because what is an endpoint is something that appears, which has an agent there, which appears under the Windows or the Linux Unix computer entry. So this is how it is defined actually in the license agreement. So from what I read, there's no price tag for SNMP devices and things you get via, like, if you have a TCP probe or UL web monitor, there's no price point for that, because that's not regarded as an endpoint. So endpoint is really like an agent managed endpoint, so to say. So obviously I don't take any well, actually I'm not a licensed expert on this, but that's as I looked a bit into this, and that's from what I read basically on the details I had. We had a similar questions for those customers that had in the past the instance-based license for 1801 and 1807, and also for them, well, like for example, we have the VMware management pack, right? And if you do use the VMware management pack, you can monitor like whatever 5,000 VMs. You don't need to put an agent on there. These are theoretically endpoints, but they come in through REST API calls in the end. So, and you don't need to license them. So that has been confirmed. So, license is required for those where you basically have an agent deployed on that. I leave it with this, but again, yeah, best ask Microsoft.
We don't think so, but better to check with your Microsoft licensing expert.
Yeah,
I guess is the answer there. Okay, we've got a couple more questions come in. If anybody else has got questions, please click in the button on the top right of the screen and submit them, because we have got a few minutes left, and I don't think we'll use them up with the other questions we've got. The next two questions are all about integration packs and having built your own within Orchestrator. So if an in-house IP has been written using the command line compiler supplied with SCORCH, I assume that's for 2019 and before, i.e. in the 32-bit version, will these need to be redone, recompiled, or is it even still possible and supported by Microsoft to rebuild those in 2025?
The toolkit for building the IPs does exist for 2022 and 2025. But yes, they would have to be rebuilt and recompiled in 2025 because the existing ones will not run.
Cool. And there's a bit of a follow-up there as well, if I can get that correctly. So again, this is for Orchestrator. So what if we have written PS code where everything was written to do invoke command localhost, which raises it from PowerShell 32-bit to a full 64 current version?
Yep.
Should that just be the case of removing the invoke command now?
Yes.
Because now you'd be in 64-bit.
Yeah, it should be just the removing the invoke command so that it just runs locally in 64-bit, assuming that the syntax in that PowerShell that you're running is PowerShell 3 or above. Then it should just be remove the invoke command and it will work.
Otherwise, you'd have to rewrite the PowerShell using the syntax in the newer versions.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you'll have to test it, and if there is a syntax issue, then fix the syntax issues.
Okay. Okay, that completes all our questions today. I'd like to thank all the presenters for their time, and thank everybody for joining us, and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.